Right, hello everyone. Right, yes, so 15 here so far. Yeah, it's just I say I've got loads to read out, so I just want to give people a chance to show up for a minute. But yeah, just to introduce this stream because I was going to do a Bernard Crow stream. I wanted to talk about the shooting of Bernard Crow, but John Donaldson actually drew my attention to all this extra stuff that is written about Billy Doyle, and I've done a few videos about Harrigan and Doyle. And it was always really strange that Billy Doyle, no one knew anything about what had happened to him after this sort of thing. But it turns out that actually there's quite a lot written about him, and he was engaged to Mama Cass and stuff like this, you know. And when John Donaldson first showed me all this, I actually said to him, "Are you sure this is the same Billy Doyle? It's not just a coincidence that there's two guys called Billy Doyle." But I verified it. No, it's definitely the same guy. The same guy who's mentioned in the police report as smuggling MDA from Canada. And my last video, video I did a couple of videos back about Harrigan and Doyle's houseboy stealing their money. That was, it's the same Billy Doyle, basically. He was engaged to Mama Cass. And it was mind blowing. So I thought, well, I've got to, do another video about this just to continue the series about Harrigan and Doyle, basically. Yeah. And a lot of this is taken from Mama Cass's biography, Dream a Little Dream of Me, which I'm going to read the whole thing now. I've started reading it because it is really I've always found her interesting and as a singer, and so I'm a singer as well. And so I've always found her interesting. And she's a singer, a woman that became famous not looking the way they expect you to look. You know what I mean? And she still succeeded, so I've always found her interesting for that as well. And it's another aspect of her life that I'm not really going to go into so much tonight, but it's really sad how she was treated as well. If you research her and when being interviewed and when being spoken to, nowadays, it's pointed out in her biography, actually, it was rarer to be fat in the 1960s than it is now. There's a lot more overweight people than there were back then. So like people got bullied even more. I mean, nowadays they wouldn't dare speak to, Tess Holiday or Lizzo or whatever, like they spoke to Mama Cass, back in those days. She really took it. But she still succeeded and she still became a successful pop star, in defiance. So I've always admired her for that. And it's sad because it becomes clear as well when you read her biography. And from what I'm going to read to you tonight, yeah, I've heard this as well. I've heard that he beat her up to make her go and talk to the police about Pic Dawson and all that as well. Yeah. John Phillips was a piece of work. I could do a whole stream about him one day, actually, and just what a nasty man he really was. And there's an interview with him where he's still making sort of snarky comments about her. In 1990, this interview's from, and he still talks quite mockingly about her and, comments about her weight and all that sort of stuff. About Mama Cass, that is, It's... it's really quite sad how she was treated. And it becomes clear in her biography and in what I'm going to read to you, how these drug dealers took advantage of her, basically. Because her house, she had like an open house, so all of Hollywood came around to her house. And it actually says in this police report that Harrigan and Doyle were trying to get in with Hollywood people in order to sell them smuggled cocaine. So it's quite clear that, these guys like Pic Dawson and Billy Doyle sort of moved in on her just to access Hollywood people to sell their drugs to, basically. And it's really sad because she actually had relationships with Pic Dawson and Billy Doyle and was apparently engaged to Billy Doyle, which is just another thing that makes it absolutely crazy that there's no pictures of him. Yeah, hi, everyone. Got to say hello to everyone as well. Hi there, Thomas and Richard and Deborah. Yeah, thank you. I think it is better actually to do it solo, isn't it? I was always worried I wouldn't be able to fill the air, with stuff to say. But no, I think I can hold a show on my own, I don't need someone else every night. Oh, I'm not even going to put that on the screen, so that's a cruel joke. But yeah, talking about drinking, though. I'm actually drinking again tonight. So that actually was one of the original themes of this show. I was supposed to be drinking every time. This is Delaney's Country Cream. It's like the cheap version of Bailey's. Some Americans told me you don't have Baileys in America, but I think they were winding me up. I think, because I've seen Canadians that have Baileys, what Irish cream liqueur is. It's like whiskey and cream, basically. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. It was fun. Mike's become unpopular though. Oh, it's all crazy, you know. We got to try and rise above drama within our community and just concentrate on talking about the case. You know what I mean? Oh, you're from England as well, are you? Yeah, yeah. I knew you had Baileys. Yeah, yeah. I know they were winding me out, weren't they? I think it's because they were men. They were men. It's a girl's drink, innit? They go, oh no, I've never heard of Baileys. Of course you have. Cool. I'll pour another one before I start. I think probably everyone's here now, aren't they? So I'll start reading. But I've got a lot to read out tonight. And I've tried to rehearse it. I'm sorry. I hope I don't stumble too much over the words. But like I say, it was really interesting. And I feel sorry for Mama Cass as well. I don't want to demonize her. This was not the point of reading all this out. Was, you know, I think it's sad, and I think she was taken advantage of. And this becomes clear, you know, when you hear what happened. And so, like, I'm not trying to put down Mama Cass. None of this was her fault. People took advantage of her hospitality and the fact that she let people, you know, stay with her. And she fed everyone. She was just a really kind person, apparently. Yeah, and it's just really sad. And these people wanted to get into the Hollywood scene so they could sell people drugs, and they took advantage of her. So yeah. Right, I'll get the presentation up on the screen anyway. There. It's just the front cover. Right, and I'm going to go off the screen while I read it out. Otherwise, you won't be able to see it. Right. The hangers-on and drug-heavy crowd still seem to invariably centre around Pic Dawson and another new friend of his and Cass's by the name of Billy Doyle. Doyle would later be described by Esquire as a stockbroker from Toronto, although this was by no means the full story. Dark-haired and dark-eyed with porcelain-perfect pale skin and rather fetchingly flushed cheeks, Doyle was indeed Canadian, of Irish extraction, and had previously worked in finance. But by the time he was living in LA, most people knew him as a tough guy with a penchant, like Dawson, for living life quite some way past what most people call the edge. Cass's friend Dave Mason remembers Doyle as Darth Vader and a human being I'd rather forget ever existed. There were various rumours circulating that he had killed a man, although there's no evidence to support this. Doyle himself seems to have actively encouraged them, as rather than putting anyone off, they seem to have only rendered him more exciting and interesting. Cass certainly thought so, and she soon began an affair with him. As with Dawson, Cass was clearly attracted to a man who seemed to bring danger and excitement into her life. Like so many other jaded stars, before and since, having strived for fame in the hope that it would fill some kind of void in her life, Cass found that once she attained it, the emptiness seemed to return only too quickly. Disillusioned, with less to achieve and more to lose, she found herself desperately looking around for something to recreate the natural high which comes from the first flush of success. Drugs, alcohol, or sex, or indeed all three, had traditionally been common sources for most in her situation, and Cass's fame had made these relatively easy to obtain. But she still yearned for a long-term romantic love. She was unlikely to find it with Doyle, however, as he seemed as improbable a candidate as Dawson to provide her the kind of affection and support she needed. But Cass was clearly enthralled. The frisson of a liaison with someone as louche must have seemed like some kind of consolation for the absence of something more substantial. And just as with Dawson, Cass was keen to see the best in him, and consequently paid less attention to his more obvious flaws. Billy just seemed like he was one of those people who aren't bad seeds, says Leah, which is her sister, by the way. But they're just spoiled and petulant and selfish and self-centered. But they're also really cute, so women are attracted to them. Even aside from the evident physical attraction, Cass clearly had an instinctive attraction to men who were invariably unreliable and unlikely to offer her the support and love she needed. Some might question why a woman of her intelligence should repeatedly fall into the same trap, but the rules of attraction have never been governed by rational intelligence. Even apart from the sense of ennui induced by her fame, Cass's predilection for dangerous or erratic men, and indeed her own need for the stimulus of an artificial high, may well have stemmed from an unconscious need to recreate the instability of her early life. What is familiar, at some level, always feels comfortable. even if it is not always in our best interest. From Cass's point of view, Doyle, meanwhile, despite his macho and bravado, seemed to be offering her commitment in the way that neither Pic Dawson nor Denny ever had, and Cass would later announce widely that she and Doyle were engaged to be married, although no marriage would ever materialise. The laissez-faire free love ethos of the time also meant that Cass's new relationship with Doyle posed no threat to her continuing on-off involvement with Dawson. Dawson himself had made no secret of the fact that he had recently had an affair with Cass's friend Nurit Wilde, but in spite of the hurt Cass clearly felt, to have expressed any resentment would have meant committing the cardinal sin of appearing uptight. For all its supposed freedom, by 1968, if you wanted to be considered hip, there was just as much pressure to conform to the polygamous free-loving ideals of hippiedom as there had been in the 50s to do the safely buttoned-up reverse. But Cass soon saw, or at least said she saw, the advantages of being able to maintain liaisons with both Doyle and Dawson simultaneously, and was soon proclaiming the virtues of the new free-loving life. Of course it's possible to love more than one man, she told London Evening News in 1974. Women are only monogamous because we're told we should be. I'm not. The trouble is that women have been programmed by parents and movies and books and songs to believe this false morality that makes us believe there's only one Mr. Right for us, and that if we lose him, we should all dress in widow's weeds. I've certainly loved more than one man at a time, she continued. I'm independent and value my freedom to live and love as I want more than anything else in the world. Right, so let's unpack some of that. Sorry, I can't see the chat while I'm reading out. Right. Well, yeah, the points that I wanted to make just about that segment anyway, before we start talking. Well, yeah, that's the only information we've got about what Billy Doyle looked like as well, and he's described as quite handsome looking, isn't he, by the sound of things, definitely. But again, it's weird that he hung around at Mama Cass's house and was engaged to Mama Cass, and there's no pictures of him at all. Even though there are many photos of there's a couple of photos of Pic Dawson, aren't there? Pic Dawson was pictured with her. But Doyle is the one she was apparently engaged to, and there's not one picture of her with him. No pictures of him at all. And even for Chaos, Tom O'Neill apparently never got a picture of him either. And also, yeah, we're going to be talking about Dave Mason later as well. Dave Mason got mentioned there. He's the musician from Traffic. He's a British guy from Traffic. His main band were called. He from, and the article that I'm going to quote from as well in that, he says, you know, he hates being referred to as that, I think. Yeah, sorry, Deborah. I hope the audio wasn't bad there, because I'm testing out this new mic. I have to lean forward as I read. I hope you could hear it all right. And I also didn't change the slide, because if I come and change the slide, I was actually reading from that page as well there. I've read down to about where it says anything else in the world down here so far. That's what I've read, in case you want to actually read it yourself later. Yeah, for people who can't hear it. Well, sorry about that. Right. And also the other point about that part as well is part where they talk about the free love aspect of the 60s, and how actually it wasn't really freedom at all, because women were still under pressure to conform to this new standard of being ready to sleep with any man that asked you to, and also putting up with men having other girlfriends and all that sort of thing. You were under pressure to conform to that. And in the decade before, it was you were supposed to be a virgin before you were married and all that sort of thing, you know, so it was totally you know, bad to have even had sex. And then suddenly everything changed in the 60s, and women were still under pressure to conform to that, whether they wanted to or not. And so like she had to put up with Pic Dawson cheating on her, because she'd have looked bad if she didn't. And this thing, obviously it comes up a lot in the Manson case, because of the way the women acted, and the way the Manson girls were all very polyamorous with everyone. This was just like how it was in the 60s, you know. Oh yeah, that's actually a doorstop, this. This is actually a doorstop, but I thought it was, well, no, it's like a draft excluder. You know, you're supposed to put it along on the floor along the bottom of the door to stop a draft coming in. But I liked it so much I didn't want to put it on the floor. They would get dirty. Yeah, I don't know. That was probably just what he said he was. And there's so much about him in the police report. I didn't get all that on the slides to show because I've read it out so much on other streams. But yeah, all about Billy Doyle in the police report is talking about how he's smuggling MDA. And it doesn't say anything about him being engaged to Mama Cass in the police report as well. It says that she asked him to leave when he pulled out 2 pounds of cocaine or something crazy. That's all it says. But like, as we'll get to later, I'm going to read out more from a biography where it talks about how she was extensively interviewed about the crimes because Pic Dawson and Billy Doyle were suspects, and I'll get into why as well, because that's another thing that's quite well known about him. But we'll get into that in a bit anyway. But yeah, sorry, just let me see what everyone else has said while I was reading. Yeah, because I can't actually see the chat when I'm reading stuff out. Yeah, and that sort of thing as well. She just wanted people to come to her house. You know, she wanted people around her all the time. And so, yeah, and obviously they're being drug dealers at your house, brought people around your house as well, didn't it? And that, so it's probably, yeah, part of that. Caroline's Irish Cream. Yeah, well, there's loads of different, but this one's called Delaney's because Bailey's is like the main one. But yeah, Country Cream. But Bailey's now has had too many thickening agents and that added to it. I don't like it so much. I actually like the cheaper ones. They taste nicer. Tons of fun. You're all so cool. Yeah. Yeah. He specialized in pharmaceutical stocks. He was that type of stockbroker. Yeah. Yeah, if Doyle works in stock market, there would have to be a fraud mafia connection. But yeah, well, that's it. And it's just really bizarre that he vanished off into oblivion. It does suggest he's protected, doesn't it? Yeah, but like I say, I couldn't believe all this, and so when someone told me about it, I just had to do a stream about this. And this is all in her biography. You can read it for free on the Internet Archive site. Just if you just search it for Billy Doyle, you can find these bits. Like I say, Charles Tackott and Pic Dawson get brought up so much in this stream as well. I'm going to have to do another stream just explaining who they are. Well, Charles Tackott is basically just Billy Doyle's mate. Yeah, we'll get into that. Right, because I've got so much to read out. I'm going to get back to reading. Right. But whatever pleasure Cass may have derived from her relationships with Doyle and Dawson, both men had also brought with them a characteristically unsavoury retinue, which seemed to shadow Cass's every move. And although most of her close friends were aware of the harm this was causing her, they generally felt powerless to help. I was aware of this struggle to find what she could do after the mamas and papas, says John Sebastian, who stayed at Woodrow Wilson Drive with Cass during this period. And I did understand that one of the encumbrances of doing all this was this group of people were constantly around. I felt that in many ways they were in the way and they just weren't helping her to do what she needed to do. There was a period where I just felt like it was impossible to reach her because you had to reach through all this clutter of hangers-on. Cass, like most of her contemporaries, believed that she genuinely had an opportunity to create a new life and a new way of living. And this, coupled with her ability to look for the best in people, often led her to keep her home more often than others. She could be cynical, says Sebastian, but she could also be that dreamer. She could see the good in a lot of people who weren't all the way good. And I think that stood in her way occasionally, where all of a sudden she'd be involved with a bunch of amphetamine heads who were suddenly living in the house. Cass's fame and status as a rock star inevitably brought with it a posse of would-be hangers-on, ready to offer whatever services they might be able to provide in exchange for becoming part of the entourage and catching some stardust along the way. Very few stars were immune to the scenario, but Cass's openness and need for affection made her even more vulnerable, and those close to her were often concerned. I'd certainly say that I felt I could have been a better friend during that period, says Sebastian heavy-heartedly, that I could have dug in a little bit harder and said, wait, this isn't you. I guess the only context that I would be able to do that in most of the time was in the studio. And that was a setting in which I was able to take her under my elbow and say, come on, hun, we're going to have some fun in the studio. And now is when these other bozos, they don't have anything to contribute, so they're not getting any closer. Unfortunately, in some cases, they were round the other side of the glass, but they couldn't get in once we started work. Leah, meanwhile, attempted to tackle what she saw as the source of Cass's problems and talked to Pic Dawson. At the point where I saw my sister really out of it and stoned and figured out where it came from, says Leah, I do remember I had a big confrontation with Pic, where I told him that he needed to get these people out and keep heroin out of the house, and that if I found out that wasn't happening, I was going to call the cops. We had this huge screaming fight, and it was just really unpleasant. He even threatened me. He said he was going to come back and cut up my face with a razor. He was just over the top, because basically I had said the magic words, I'm going to call the cops. And that just wasn't something you said to somebody back then. So I think that helped for a little while. But Cass and I had some kind of confrontation about it. And she was the one who came and told me that I'd really pissed off Pic, and she was worried that he was going to make good on this threat. During Dawson's absences, Cass had tried to overcome her heroin habit and checked into a rehab clinic more than once. After her first day, her mother Bess, who couldn't help but be aware of what was going on, had helped nurse her through the difficult adjustment period afterwards. But by the next time, her mother was no longer at the house. Cass knew that going back to Woodrow Wilson Drive would inevitably undo the work she had just spent time and money to achieve, so she phoned Denny instead. Although the scenario at Denny's was hardly clean living, it seemed more so than her own home, and she thought that if she went and stayed with him for a short while, it would allow her time to ease herself into a new drug-free regime. She called him from the clinic, but his friend Bobby Simone answered the phone and told her Denny was apparently comatose in an unshakable sleep. Simone therefore drove to the clinic to fetch her, but having been unable to talk to Denny, took her back to Woodrow Wilson Drive. Alongside Cass's mother, Lee Kiefer, who also tried to help Cass, but had eventually become frustrated with the impossibility of the situation, and although they were still friends and would remain so, he was now no longer living at the house. I had really had enough of it, says Kiefer, just not being able to stop people from getting her loaded, the heroin. I couldn't do anything to protect her. If I left her for 30 seconds, there was a rat in the feed bin, just like this, he says, snapping his fingers. If I left her alone for 5 hours, there'd be somebody over there trying to give her something she didn't need. There was no way I could protect her from that. So I just felt helpless, and it became too much for me. She had to stop the heroin. She had a grip on everything else. It was just the heroin. That and Pic Dawson. Right, I was actually reading from that slide. If I change the slides, it messes with my reading speed. There. Right. So it's well, that's pretty shocking, isn't it? As well, that her sister confronted him and said she would call the cops on him, and he threatened to slash her face. Yeah. Oh, what? Sorry, I've written notes so I don't forget. Yeah, it's shocking. But yeah, and like I say, it's clear that they were all taking advantage of her from this, isn't it? You know, and they moved in, you know, just to be part of her entourage and to access more famous people to sell drugs. And no, yeah, that was basically, yeah, that was all I'd written. But yeah, it's shocking. Yeah, well, that's it. So it shows, yeah, Pic Dawson wasn't a nice guy, but it does say in Chaos, Dawson died. Pic Dawson died of an overdose. So he's no longer alive. So you don't got to worry about him. But he does say, I'll get to this as well, Billy Doyle threatened to have him killed a couple of times during their interview. So I hope he's not watching now and thinking of having me killed. Please don't kill me, Billy. Right, so what? Anyone else got any comments about that? So like I say, yeah, that's shocking. And also, I was surprised by how much it revealed about her heroin problem, because that was something that they seem to be trying to cover up before. Because I don't believe that it's true. I actually think that her death was probably caused by something like what we now call sleep apnea. I don't think that she really did die or was killed. I don't think she died of a heroin overdose or was killed. Because from what I'm reading in her biography now, she did quit heroin at the end of the 60s. And so I don't think she did overdose on heroin. But there was a rumor that she died of a heroin overdose. So I was surprised that her biography actually went into the fact she did have a heroin habit, and she went to rehab a couple of times to kick it, and she did apparently manage to kick it, and she was living a much cleaner life by the time she died. And they weren't good at determining the cause of her death, but I don't know how much they knew about this sleep apnea thing back then, because a lot of obese people have to wear a machine when they're sleeping at night because you stop breathing in the night. If there's a lot of fat around your neck, you can stop breathing in the night. So they have to wear a machine. I think it was possibly something closer to that actually caused her death. Yeah, he's behind me. He saw the preview on YouTube, yeah, and he's been traveling on a plane ever since. He's outside my house now. Oh God. No, seriously though, if he does see this, for the God's sake, send us a picture. We want to see a picture of what you look like in the 60s. It sounds like you were hot. Why are there no pictures of him? That is the craziest thing as well. My God. Like I say, it just makes it even weirder, because when I'd only read what was like written in the police report about him, and we'll get into it later, but there's the incident that occurred to him, the embarrassing incident, and so you can understand why he would want to hide his identity because of that. But then to hear that he managed Dave Mason. We'll get to this as well. So he got into music management, probably from dating Mama Cass. And, and there's still no one's got a photo of him. Why the hell is there no pictures of Billy Doyle? And it gets into more, just talking about Mama Cass and references to Mama Cass's house and the Manson case. There's also Michael Caines. There's a part in his autobiography, but it's kind of problematic as well. Like, so some of it sounds like fabrication, but we'll get into it. But it does mention Mama Cass's house, and it makes a point about the Manson family, so it's definitely worth mentioning. The dog Polaroid as a passport picture, yeah. Yeah, but that's well. I have actually got the extract from Chaos. I'll show it later. Right. This is Michael Caines' biography. Oh, I can actually stay on the screen for this, can't I? So I'm not covering the text. And this is quite short, thankfully. I won't do it in his voice. I've got a British accent anyway. He does a terrible. His Cockney accent isn't real, by the way. He's actually really posh. He's faking that Cockney accent. My mother was a true Cockney. Everyone was disgusted by his Cockney accent, who actually came from London. I had become very good friends with Mama Cass, the lead singer with the Mamas and Papas singing group. And one night she invited me to a party given for the birthday of some rock and roll singer. She introduced Johnny Morris and myself to a lot of musicians who were obviously famous, as one could tell by their entourages, who hung on their every word, or in most cases mumble. Steve Brandt came by for a while but had to leave. Then Sharon Tate came in with a whole group of people, including my friend and barber Jay Sebring. After a little while they left, and I waved goodnight to them, not knowing I was never going to see them again. Johnny and I were beginning to enjoy ourselves when a scruffy little man came in with some girls who were not only scruffy, but really dirty. They seemed quite out of place, and I couldn't think who could have invited them. Mama Cass introduced me to the guy, who did not shake hands, but just said, "Hi," and looked me up and down for a moment in a way that gave me the creeps. "This is Charles Manson," said Mama Cass. He smiled and walked away. Johnny is normally fearless, but he became immediately uneasy. And when I asked him what the matter was, he said, "Let's get out of here. I don't like that little guy." I laughed. "No." Johnny insisted. "I mean it, Mike. Let's go. We don't need to be with people like this." How right he was. We left. Not only the party, but a week later, Hollywood as well. Some months passed, and I settled back into life in London. And when I learned the terrible news that Charles Manson and the girls with him that night had not only killed Sharon and Jay, but the rest of the group that were there with them, even that was not the end of it for me, however. Several months later, they found a death list belonging to the Manson group, and among the many people on it was my friend Steve Brandt, who became so terrified by this that he actually committed suicide. Johnny's gut instinct for villains had been right. I had lost 3 friends. Hollywood was by no means just fun and glitz and glamour after all. Right, so that's what Michael Caines said. But there's a couple of things. Yeah, well, it says that he left. They had left before Charlie arrived. It is what he says. He says that Jay and Sharon were there, but then they left, and then Charles Manson arrived. But a lot of it just sounds kind of fabricated, because as soon as he says a scruffy little man, he calls him a scruffy little man. What does that remind you of? That is fucking directly taken from Helter Skelter, right? Because there's the thing that has pretty much been proved to be a fabrication now, saying that Charles Manson is supposed to have gone up to Cielo Drive and been speaking to the gardener. And he came up and he said he was looking for Terry Melcher. And he said Terry Melcher doesn't live here anymore. And he left. And Sharon is supposed to have seen him and said to the gardener, who was that scruffy little man? And so it's like weird that in Michael Caine's biography, he describes him as a scruffy little man. And so it's like, it does sound like he's trying to distance himself. And when I read you the next part of Mama Cass's biography, I'm going to read, you'll sort of get more of a point about this. But a lot of people who met Charles Manson before the murders tried to distance themselves from him and probably said, oh, as soon as I met him, I didn't like him. When actually at the time, a lot of people just, because they wouldn't have really stood out from other hippie communes and that, you know what I mean? And he was a musician. He was a guitarist, you know, and a singer, and he used to sit and jam with everyone, you know. Yeah. Well, this is it as well. They did all, like, because a lot of people are cynical about the idea that the family actually hung out with celebrities and that, but that's what I'm getting into tonight. Because there's documented stuff about the family actually knowing these celebrities, and obviously Dennis Wilson, that's well documented that Charles Manson and the girls live with Dennis Wilson. Hi, Charlie. Yeah, I've already read out quite a bit if you've just arrived. So you'd have to watch that on playback. But yeah, this is all stuff about Mama Cass. Just to recap. And how she was engaged to Billy Doyle, which makes it weird as hell that there's no pictures of him. Yeah. But the Michael Caine thing, what else had I written? Oh, the death list as well. He mentions the death list. And he says they found a death list. But the death list was not a written list that they physically found. The death list was something that Susan said to Virginia Graham while she was in prison. Because, you know, Virginia Graham is the one that Susan's supposed to have confessed that she killed Sharon Tate to. And Sharon Tate, that's how they're supposed to have found out that the Manson family did this. But that all looks very weird as well, you know. It looks like Virginia Graham was told what to say and all this sort of crap, you know. But there wasn't... Right, Michael Caine. Let me get it back up on the screen again just to see what he said. Several months later, they found a death list belonging to the Manson group, and among the many people on it was my friend Steve Brandt, who became so terrified by this that he actually committed suicide. Right, and that isn't true. Right, they didn't find a physical death list. The death list was something Susan Atkins is supposed to have said to Virginia Graham. She's supposed to have said they were going to kill Frank Sinatra and the Pope and this long list of celebrities that they had said that they was going to try and kill. But there wasn't actually physically a death list found. So like a lot of what Michael Caine said there was just fabrication. I don't know why he would have done that as well. He didn't need to do that to sell his autobiography. People would have fucking bought it anyway. Yeah, but there was not, as far as I know, if anyone can show me evidence of otherwise, right? But the death list was not a list they physically found. It wasn't. There was no actual written list. That is all taken from. When you're on Facebook, you've got to click through. There's a post I've pinned on the top of the group. You've got to just click through to StreamYard and give it permission. And then it can show your name and your picture. Then I can see who it is. Thank you, though. Yeah, I've been researching this all for a long time. Anyway, but it's just so yeah. But the reason I included that though is it does put the Manson family. It's someone else saying that they met, and apparently Charles Manson verified that with Nicholas Schreck. Nicholas Schreck asked him. And Charles Manson remembers meeting Michael Caine at Mama Cass's house. And the actor, the other guy that he talks about, Johnny... Sorry, let's get it back on the screen again. What's he called? He has verified it independently as well. Johnny Morris, yes. Johnny Morris has also independently verified that they all met at Mama Cass's house. Yes, that's what I think as well. That's what I think. Yeah, when she was just because she was just trying to make herself sound scary so the other women wouldn't attack her. Basically, because in women's prison it's quite a harsh atmosphere. You know what I mean? She was scared. So yeah, they do that. You do that in prison. You say you're as crazy as you can, so people leave you alone. So I think that's what she was doing. And I've never heard any of the others say that they all sat around making a list of what celebrities they wanted to kill. It was just something Susan said to Virginia Graham. It wasn't actually a physical list that they had written out. So that is just not right, not correct. Right, and what was the next slide? Yes, now this is another long passage of reading. So I'll wait a minute. Anyone else got anything else to say? Because this is more about the Charles Manson case. And I just picked a part of the biography. I sort of cut off a bit, but it's just basically saying how she was hauled in to be questioned when it all happened because of who the suspects were. And again, there's another discrepancy in here. It just goes to show when people are writing about this case, they don't always look, do they? Very thoroughly. Oh, no, pour another drink before I start reading again. Yeah, well, there's, she was, yeah. And there's a thing called histrionic personality disorder that I learned about from studying this case. I heard one of them get diagnosed with it at a probation hearing, and it wasn't one that I'm familiar with, a personality disorder, because there's quite a few personality disorders. But when I looked up what histrionic personality disorder is and what the symptoms are, it's crazy. So actually, Tex is said to have had it at one of his probation hearings. But when I looked up what it was, Tex showed it, but not as much as the others. Actually, Leslie and Susan show it really high, and so does Charles Manson. Believe it or not, look up histrionic personality disorder. I'll type it in the chat. Histrionic personality disorder, right? And but one of the major symptoms of it is they want to be the center of attention. So they'll say, even when it's inappropriate or embarrassing and it embarrasses people or whatever. So in a very, very extreme cases, it does explain what the Manson girls were doing. They were trying to outshine each other. They were trying to all be the worst sounding one and all that, But it is actually really quite telling. Histrionic personality disorder. Once you read the symptoms, you should be able to see it too, right? Charles Manson, Leslie, and Susan show it really high. If you read what the symptoms of it are. Yeah, well, that's another thing. That is another thing about Charles Manson, and also it protected him from getting killed because of what he knew, right? Because if you get what I mean, because if he acted crazy, then no one would believe what he said anyway. So no one would want to kill him because of everything that he knew. Because, so that was another reason that he did that, why he acted so crazy. Do you get what I mean? Did I explain that well, right? So he would make sure that he looked as crazy as possible so that no one would think, oh, no one will listen to Charlie anyway. So it doesn't matter what he knows about us because he acts so crazy. Is it a way of protecting himself? Linda, I think Sadie had the potential to be a good killer. It's just the aftermath. She was young. Still in jail with possible career criminals. Yeah, well, that's it. Well, that's another sort of great tragedy of this case because these kids lost their lives as well. They all lost their lives, didn't they? They had no. Yeah, it was something I was talking when I was looking when I was doing the Gary Hinman stream. I was talking to Nicholas Schreck, and he made a good point that the kids had no free life. all of them that went to prison. Like I think Susan was 18. Most of the girls were not much older than 18 or 19, were they? I think Bobby was 23. Tex was a bit older. I think by the time he went to prison, he was about 27, wasn't he? But they had no free adult life, really. Charles Manson had 6 years of freedom, but these kids lost their lives. They had nothing, did they? I think he's a sociopath. But I think that he, yeah, I think he was sadistic. Obviously, yeah. Well, to do what he did, to do what they did to Sharon Tate, you would have to be sadistic. That is crazy because if you look at my stream, Drug Burn Part 2, the blood evidence shows Sharon Tate was outside trying to run away. And they dragged her back inside. They started stabbing her outside and they still grabbed her and dragged her back inside and killed her. That's how merciless they were. A pregnant woman trying to run away from them. And they still fucking, oh, it's awful. So yeah, that's quite sadistic, isn't it? That's quite evil. They really were nasty, nasty people who deserve to be in prison. You know, and I'm not ever trying to say that they was not nasty people who don't deserve to be in prison. I just want the truth to be known. That's the only reason I do this. Yeah, and there is evidence, yeah, that he had already committed violent crimes as well. And I just think from the way Cielo Drive went, I don't believe that this was the first time they had killed people. I think that this, though it wasn't well planned, there was very little hesitation in the way they stabbed them and all that sort of thing. You know, I mean, I think that they had stabbed people before. Excuse me. Like my cigarette, I don't think that it was... Those sociopaths can get a fetish for violence as well. Not a fetish as such, but those sociopaths do they like attacking people and running away and getting away with it. It's like a hooliganism thing. I don't know, what would you call it in America? Shit, do you use the word hooliganism? Just, you know, gangs of violence gangs, like what they have in the Clockwork Orange, you know, the street violence. That's sociopaths. Sociopaths do that. They like to grab someone and beat them up and run away and get away with it. And they get a rush after they've done it and got away with it. That is sociopaths. Sociopaths do it and enjoy it. Yeah, they get off on violence. It's not just psychopaths. Oh, yeah, and it was definitely the drugs. The drugs they were on. So many drugs, more than just meth. So many different hallucinogens and that. Yeah, well, it's, yeah, me as well, because bloody hell, she was like, if you look at her history, she's the least likely to do something like this. And the evidence looks like out of all of them, she was the one that actually did the most of the actual stabbing. And I think that it was, because she was bullied really badly, wasn't she, by them all? They thought she was, because she was not the prettiest of them all, was she? And she had a hairy body and all that sort of thing. So she was bullied. And I think maybe she was trying to impress Charles Manson or try and win approval from people when she did this so violently. Yeah. Yeah, but you know, just the general term that you would use for gangs of usually men, but you do get women do it now as well. But yeah, groups of people that go around just looking for violence and to cause trouble and to be arseholes, you know. Yeah. Yeah, well, there's lots of talk in his psychiatry report. They're talking to him about the drugs he was doing a lot, and the list of drugs he reels off. I actually did a clip where I read out one of the parts from his psychiatry reports where he starts talking about the amount of drugs he was doing around the time. Yeah. And lots of hallucinogens and lots of different amphetamine-based drugs he was doing. Yeah, these sorts of things, yeah, just people are hanging around. But that's sociopaths as well, yeah. Because actually the term psychopath and sociopath are not clinical terms anymore. They haven't been for years. But when you're talking about true crime, it's easy to still use the terms because people basically understand the difference. Because a psychopath has no empathy at all, but a sociopath is capable of empathy, but they can repress it at certain times and commit violent crimes. But later they are capable of feeling bad about it. That's basically the difference. But in other ways, they're the same. But the sociopaths are good at repressing their feelings. They can repress their feelings for a long time and that sort of thing. But psychopaths just don't have any empathy for other humans. They don't like feel other people's pain. They can't understand other people exist the same way they do and feel pain the way they do. So yeah, but now the clinical term is antisocial personality disorder, and sociopaths and psychopaths both would now fall under that umbrella. And it's just how much empathy they can feel. So it's like there's a scale of empathy. So what they used to call a psychopath is now a person with antisocial personality disorder with zero capability for empathy. And then there's like a scale of empathy for like how much empathy, but someone, so yeah, a sociopath would have been, like a psycho, but could feel some empathy. But that was too vague. Those, so now they've called it antisocial personality disorder. But yeah, it's not. There's still debate. No one's ever agreed about whether they're born that way or whether they're created. But it's called the nature nurture debate, because nature means they were born that way. Nurture means society created them. And Charles Manson is really often cited as a case of a nurtured psychopath, or nowadays you'd call him person with antisocial personality disorder. But I don't believe he was a psychopath. I believe he did have some capability for empathy. So he's what you call a sociopath. But yeah, I do believe some can be, because it really is all about your early developmental years. And if really terrible things happen to you when you're a very young child, then you crush your empathy just in order to survive, in order to be able to survive. Yeah, sociopaths do have capacity for empathy and get attached. And they can feel bad later about what they've done, but they can repress their guilt and feelings for a long time and all that sort of thing. But they are actually capable of feeling bad about it later. So that's the terrifying thing about psychopaths, is they are not. And there is, yeah, it is. It's all about early development. So but there have been cases of kids, and this is actually something that people talk about now, where the kid really had a charmed life. Like they were in a middle class household, and they were treated well, and they did have money spent on them, and their parents did engage with them, and they just have turned out to have no empathy or care for other people. So there are cases of people born a psychopath and nothing. But also, talking about those sorts of people, it's like the parents say that they've had a good life, but were they emotionally neglected maybe as a young child, and the parents just don't want to admit that they worked all the time and the kid was just in the nursery while they was out working or whatever, or stuck with a nanny or whatever, and so like they felt neglected from an early age or whatever. But yeah, who knows? Yeah, that's it as well. And that's the other thing. That's another reason why they stopped using the term psychopath and sociopath, because psychopaths became associated with violent serial killers. And actually, most psychopaths aren't violent at all, right? They never do anything violent. Right? They actually end up as, lawyers and things like that, and also, yeah, big CEOs, because they have no sympathy or empathy for others. So they'll trample over others to get successful. Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, they're just soulless. They just don't give a shit about anyone else. Yeah. Antisocial personality disorder. That's what it's called now. Yeah, but psychopath and sociopath are outdated terms. Like, they're not clinical diagnosis anymore. Yeah. Oh God, there's actually footage of Jolyon West giving lectures, because in his later life he became a deprogrammer. He claimed to be able to deprogram people that had been indoctrinated into cults, and he got in trouble. The Scientologists hated him because he called Scientology a cult and all that. But you can actually see him talking, and he looks like such a psychopath. He really does. He's so scary. Yeah, but no, they've just changed the name of the diagnosis now, basically. So like, you're either Zero empathy or however much empathy. Right. Now, what else did I have to read out? I've got to get this read out because how long have we been going? Cool, we've been going nearly an hour. So I like to keep them. Right, so I got to Michael Caine. Oh, no, this is the good bit. Yeah, this is about the. Right. Yeah, and I just I cut into it, but it's basically they're talking about how when the Manson murders happened, Cass was subjected to particularly intensive questioning by the police. Apart from having known the victims, which half of Hollywood society could equally have laid claim to, Cass was further implicated by association. When the bodies of the victims had been discovered, the police had found the words pig blurrily scrawled on the wall of the house in blood. John Phillips had informed the police the widely circulating theory that what had been written was in fact Pic, in reference to Pic Dawson. Some believed this could directly point to his guilt. Both Dawson and Billy Doyle were known to have been regular guests at Cielo Drive during the summer, and as Dawson was already well known to the police, Cass was once again called into account for his whereabouts. For all his bravado, Dawson, however, seemed unlikely to have carried out a series of murders of this ferocity. Besides, Cass had no idea where Dawson was, and if she had, it is unlikely that she would have told the police. The other major rumour ricocheting through Hollywood Hills, which is still cited by many, all of these years on, concerned Billy Doyle. It was known at the time that Sebring and Frykowski had a penchant for cruising Sunset Strip and bringing home young men. After drugging them, they would tie them up and film them. Some weeks before the murders, as the tale goes, they had a spectacular falling out with Doyle over a business deal gone sour and decided to exact revenge, not only by doing what they usually did to their pickups, but by flogging him in front of an invited audience. And there's sources that say they did way more than flog him, right? Right, but we'll get to that in a minute. Yeah. They apparently recorded this on film. The story then goes that when Doyle realised what had happened, he was, according to Monkey Peter Tork, who was living in the canyons at the time, murderous, raging. Doyle insisted he would kill Folger and Frykowski. Wary that he might carry out his threat, a similarly macho friend chained him to a tree in Cass's garden to calm him down, before hauling him onto a plane out of the country. In the light of Doyle's oft-repeated claims that he had killed a man and his overall hardcore machismo stance, it is easy to understand how an episode like this might have been considered sufficient motive for him to have committed the murders. If they were going to do that to Billy, says Tork, they wanted to die. That was death-provoking. It was a murderously dangerous thing to do. Eventually, after months of rumour and speculation, both Doyle and Dawson were cleared of suspicion, and Charles Manson, a 35-year-old ex-convict, fraudster, pimp, and con-man with a Jesus fixation, and his family of mostly young and female followers were revealed as the murderers. Manson had a talent for attracting the young and the dispossessed, and somehow managed to almost brainwash his acolytes into accompanying him on his nihilistic quest for supposed salvation and power through murder. Manson and his crew had been frequent visitors to Cass's house, taking advantage, like so many others, of the plentiful food, drugs, and generally laid-back and hospitable atmosphere. But Cass was not the only one who had played host to him and his acolytes, unaware of what would ensue. Although in the aftermath of the murders, few would admit to any link, many prominent figures in the LA rock community had not only socialised with Manson and his family, particularly his harem of young women, who made themselves readily available to anyone interested, but developed closer associations with them. As Neil Young later remembered, a lot of pretty well-known musicians around LA knew Manson, though they probably deny it now. The girls were always around too. They'd be right there on the couch with me singing a song. The Beach Boys, Dennis Wilson in particular, had welcomed them into his life and taken steps towards helping Manson in his attempts to attain a record deal, and his subsequent failure to do so was at one point considered a motive for the murders. But prior to that, Manson and co. would have seemed like no more than yet another of LA's umpteen crews of nomadic hippies, sitting around smoking, playing the guitar, and hanging out at other people's houses. There would have been nothing noticeable to differentiate them from any other similar group, and the open house atmosphere of Woodrow Wilson meant that it was easy for them to wander in and hang out. Because of Cass's connections to the case, meanwhile, when it finally came to court, she was subpoenaed as a witness, as was John Phillips. who was also a good friend of Polanski and Dennis Wilson. The police had found sheet music to the Mamas and Papas Straight Shooter propped up on the music holder of the baby grand piano in the living room of Cielo Drive when the bodies had been found, which seemed to link Phillips to the case. Eventually, as the true facts came to light, Cass and John were both cleared of any involvement. Right. So, that basically is talking about how, obviously, the Manson family hung out at her house. And she wasn't the only person. That was the interesting thing I found out of that they were saying. Oh, yes, and obviously the Billy Doyle incident there described, right? We'll get into it later. But that incident, and also it's shocking, isn't it, that they say in this that Jay Sebring and Frykowski were known to have a penchant for picking up young men and drugging them and then filming them. I mean, that's creepy as hell, isn't it? And like, these are two of the victims of Cielo Drive, by the way, in case people don't realise. Jay Sebring and Frykowski were the two men killed at Cielo Drive. And also, crazy that the guy from the Monkees was the one giving that quote about they must have wanted to die if they would do that to Billy Doyle. It was a murderously dangerous thing to do. Oh, yeah. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't subscribed. And hit the bell so that you get notifications. You go hit the bell and click all to get all the notifications. Yeah, so that's it. So what were they doing with all these videos of young men they were picking up off the strip and filming? And in this version, they're playing down what they did to him as well. They didn't just flog him in front of an audience. They're supposed to have done more. There's about Susan Atkins here. Yeah, this is yes, this is why. Yeah, she said the things she said to Virginia Graham were because she was scared because they were coming onto her, and yeah, so she was trying to scare them off by saying, "Yeah, I was the one that stabbed Sharon Tate, and I was and we're going to kill all these other celebrities and that." But I've also heard that she was actually aggressively bisexual herself, and she was the one coming onto other people, not the other way around. So she's lying herself when she said that she was scared of the older women coming onto her. Yeah. Yeah, that was it. But histrionic personality disorder, right, makes them want to look like the worst one for whatever reason, because they stand out more than the others, whether it's bad or not, whether the attention's bad or not. It's crazy. But yes, well, and also it's they speak about the incident, don't they? What does it say? Yeah, and like I said, I couldn't believe that the guy from the Monkees is the one making that comment about. Sorry, to look at it. And yeah, and just what they say about lots of people actually hung out with them, but wouldn't admit it now. And Neil Young is one of the only people that will still talk about him. And that, but lots of people actually hung out with the Manson family. They just wouldn't admit it later. And what Michael Caines says, Michael Caine trying to distance himself and making out he was freaked out as soon as he saw him and all that, it's just, yeah. Yeah, that is a rumor. Yeah, that they were actually on acid in court. That it was smuggled into in the clothes they was wearing. So that might explain the day they walked in singing and holding hands. I haven't read her whole biography yet, but I will get back to you on that. So I don't know, but I'm assuming the other guy that she's mentioned as having a relationship with was a guy called Denny. So him presumably, but I'll look that up. But Pic Dawson and Billy Doyle, she already had the child, I think, by the time Pic Dawson and Billy. So it wasn't Pic Dawson or Billy Doyle. No, it was. I think she already had the child. The child was a young girl. Because I think that must be. There's the picture of Pic Dawson sat next to Eric Clapton and Mama Cass and all that, and the guy from Cosby, Stills and Nash and all that. The little girl on the grass, I think that is Mama Cass's daughter. If that is a little girl, because of the '60s clothes and the haircut and that, it's wearing it. Sorry if that is her daughter, and I can tell if you're a boy or a girl from that picture. Bless her. Denny. Yes, her kid was born before she met Doyle. Was Denny one of the mamas and papas? I'm not sure. Oh yeah, because bloody hell, I know so little about them. Yeah, because I know there's Michelle Phillips and John Phillips, and who was the other bloke called? Yeah, was he Denny? Sorry, but no, I haven't read a whole biography yet. But in the bits that I've read out there, it refers to the other guy that she was with was Denny. And when she came out of rehab, she wanted to go and stay with Denny for a few days, so she didn't have to go back to her house and see all the junkies again. But fucking, she ended up, he couldn't be woken from his sleep, so she had to go back to her house. Oh god, yeah, because there is a whole article about that as well. I'm not going to talk about it tonight, but I will link it in the description when I leave this back for playback. There is an article about being, because she was in the UK, weren't she? Because of the it's all to do with smuggling as well. Denny Doherty was in the band, so it might be, Denny Doherty that's referring to then. So I don't know if that means he's necessarily the father of her daughter. Oh, right. So you dated her, but didn't want to be seen in public with her. Yeah. No, but by the sound of things, he did actually sleep with her. He didn't turn her down because of her weight. No man ever does. That's another thing that fat women have to deal with is fucking the man not wanting to be seen in public with them and that. It's horrible. Oh, that's sad. Yeah. She proposed to him, and he never, and he just didn't answer, and he loved her. Yeah. I have also controversially heard that as well, but these are just unfounded rumors. But yeah, since we're doing the Mama Cass stream, we got to talk about everything. We know there is a rumor that it's her and Steve McQueen or something like that. She's supposed to have been with. I don't know, but there is supposed to be a porno of her and Mama Cass. I'm wearing the '60s top since it was the Mama Cass stream. I decided to wear my '60s top again. I wore this for the one that I did around Halloween, dressed as a Manson girl. Yeah, and I got a shell necklace as well. Kind of '60s looking, isn't it? Yes, yeah. John Phillips didn't even want her in the band at first. She had to fight to even be in the band. And there's an interview that he gives in 1990. And even though he's nearly crying when he's talking about the fact she's dead and when he's recalling her death, he's still saying nasty things about her weight. You know what I mean? It's like the arseholes. Really, and she actually made his song sound better with her vocal harmonies and that, you know what I mean? And so he owed her shit, but he still fucking laughed at her weight. Hmm. It's disturbing. It's disturbing to think of it. What the hell did they all get up to? And there's rumors that there's videos of there was tapes of Susan and Jay Sebring as well. That's another one that I've heard. That gets mentioned. That's in Neil Sanders' book, and Nicholas probably mentions it in the Manson file as well. Yeah, exactly. I think she was actually the more talented one, really. And their songs, oh god, yeah, he's gross. I've not got the book next to me now, but Mackenzie Phillips' book. Get Mackenzie Phillips' book, High on Arrival. He was a sick man. Yeah. Sure, you mean diet pills? You find she's auto-corrected, isn't it? Yeah, well, she was, because I'm reading her biography, they put her on the diet pills when she was a teenager, and it never worked, obviously. It never helped her lose weight, but it just got her on drugs. It got her into taking speed, basically. But it didn't work. She didn't lose weight. And she stayed in weight loss clinics and everything. It's really sad. and she just had what they now call binge eating disorder, but they didn't know fuck all about. Well, they knew about eating disorders, but they didn't really know how to treat them very well back then. So, I mean, look at what happened to Karen Carpenter. She fucking starved to death in front of the whole world, and no one did fuck all, you know. And what Mama Cass had is just the opposite of what Karen Carpenter had, you know. She ate herself to death. And I think her death, from what I've read so far, it sounds like probably some kind of sleep apnea. Yeah, and she still taking drugs, still taking the speeds, the stimulants, the amount of pressure it puts on your heart being overweight, and then on top of that doing a load of cocaine or speed. And she was taking speed from given to her by a fucking doctor, you know, since a teenager. So yeah, that does damage your heart. So there would have been damage to her heart. I think it was probably something close to sleep apnea, you know, just the fat around her neck. Because the guy, yeah, from what I have read so far, because right at the beginning of the book, it tells you like her last night. And the guy walked in and he saw her sleeping naked on the bed watching the television, and she was snoring. And snoring is can be a sign of the sleep apnea starting to occur. So she might have just like in her sleep. Because now, you know, now there are more obese people. There's more known about it. The people that are really obese and have the sleep apnea thing have to wear machines on their face to make sure they don't suffocate in their sleep. I think it was probably something closer to that killed her than anything else. Yeah, well, totally. And he screwed up her metabolism, so yeah, it didn't help her at all. It just made it probably, you know, just made her hungrier. You know. And it goes into great detail, her biography, about, you know, what was driving her to eat. And because her family were all immigrants, and her grandmother had seen people starving during, you know, the Holocaust and all this sort of thing. So she was she felt compelled to feed everyone, and she just spoiled Cass basically. And Cass also got envious when her sister was born and felt neglected by her parents, and her grandmother was giving her food constantly, and so that was, you know, so she just started comfort eating from an early age and got fat. And back then it was rarer to be fat as well. It wasn't as, you know, as common as it is now. So yeah, she really took it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and just more sedentary lifestyle as well, isn't it? Because there's so much now, we don't have to go out to do a lot of things that you used to have to go out and walk around to do, isn't it? It is. It's sad, though, the way she was treated. Like I said, these are all eating disorders, and these things just weren't very well known about. But there were weight loss clinics, and well, because I get this from a John Phillips interview. John Phillips said that there was a wing of the weight loss clinic she used to go to named after her, and obviously it didn't work. She never did manage to lose weight, did she? Bless her. I think if she had survived, bloody maybe she would have done. I hope she would have done later. But it's you have to learn another way to cope without food, don't you? You know, so like, did they give her the correct therapy to give her another way to cope with emotions other than eating? What did they do for her? Who knows? Yes, and this is also brought up. It's also brought up in her biography. Yeah, that she did it for protection. A lot of women do that as well. Yeah, or also, this didn't happen to Mama Cash from what I can see from her biography, or it doesn't go into it, but sometimes women who were sexually abused when they were children, when they started to put on weight, the guy that was molesting them wasn't so interested, so they carried on eating to stop being molested, which is another horrible truth, but apparently that is quite common. So that's another reason why some... I'm not saying as a blanket statement that's why any woman that's overweight is, but that is one reason it can happen, yeah. When they start to put on weight, people that are molesting them aren't interested anymore, so they just carry on eating. Yeah, well, I read it out. Yeah, it's been confirmed. Yeah, he hung around her house, and she introduced him to Michael Caine. Yeah, well, she definitely wasn't lazy, and singing is more strenuous than people think as well. It doesn't really give you a cardio bloody workout, but you know, you have to be quite physically fit to be able to sing a whole show. right? She can't have been that unfit if she could stand there and sing a whole show without collapsing, right? It's much harder than it looks singing, right? So she must have had some level of physical fitness and strength, just to be able to do that. It doesn't look like you're doing anything because you're just standing there, but actually you're using, I think it's 75 muscles in total. You're using all the muscles in your neck, you're using muscles in your face, and internal muscles all around your lungs and all that. It's actually much more tiring than it looks. So she can't have been, that. Yeah, I read it out. Just now. It's her biography. It's in her biography, and there's many other books, but the biography I've been reading from. Oh, sorry. There. Yeah, and Michael Caine as well. And Michael Caine's biography. Michael Caine says he was introduced to Charles Manson around Mama Cass's thing. And it's Sadie, Susan says in her books that Mama Cass taught her how to make BLT sandwiches. So it's quite well known that the Manson family did, in fact, hang out around Mama Cass's house. And the point that they make in this biography as well is they hung around with a lot of other Hollywood people as well. People just didn't want to admit it later. So Mama Cass is the only one that's sort of like, people know that they hung out at their house. What's the next slide after that? Oh, yeah, and I was just going to show this again. But this is the photo of Mama Cass's Dune buggy. This is from the Cielo Drive police report. Basically, this is from one of the sound reports. And he's talking about hunting dogs at his residence. That do not generally, then this is, just but at the end of the sound report. I've read this out many times on my other streams where I'm talking about Cielo Drive, so I'm not going to read out the whole thing. But at the end, he says he's been concerned about a Lavender Volkswagen type Dune buggy, XSP 193, and a black foreign type motorcycle, possibly a Triumph, that have been seen and reported driving about the area for the past 6 weeks in the late night and early morning hours. These two vehicles have not been connected with the incident at this time, but this is from the police report of Cielo Drive. And this is a picture I found of Mama Cass in her purple Dune buggy, basically. So, yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I'll sorry about that. When you get back on Wi-Fi, I will leave this up. This is running on for a long time now, so I'll get reading out the rest of the stuff. But people are still talking, aren't they? People are still here. It's all right. But this is just more about Mama Cass and how she's associated with the crimes. Not that she took part, and also it's important to point out that the vehicles would have just been at her house. And I haven't included it in the slides, but there is a picture of her with her Triumph motorcycle as well. Because someone said in the chat, it's scrolled by now, but someone said, yeah, she rode a motorcycle. Which, again, you have to be strong enough to sit and hold yourself up as you're moving along and that. Yeah, so she must have had some level of physical fitness to be able to do that. But, yeah, this is the thing about the Dune buggy. And she was extensively interviewed over all this, and she's mentioned in other places in the police report. I haven't put all of that into this stream because I've said it so many other times on my other streams. But yeah, she's mentioned in the police report. Says in her biography she was extensively interviewed. She had to talk about Pic Dawson, where Pic Dawson was and all that. Yeah, well, it seemed to be a place where her house seemed to be a place where drug dealers went to peddle drugs, doesn't it? Yeah. And there's lots of evidence that Tex was dealing drugs, yeah. So he probably was, yeah. Known to them. So like I said, so much has been done to like draw attention away from Charles Watson as well, when he was like the most aggressive one, really. He was the actual perpetrator, wasn't he? And it's like he's the one, the more controversial one, because he was the actual one that did the murders, not Charles Manson. And so even less people are going to want to admit that they knew Tex Watson and hung out with Tex Watson. I have it known that they bought drugs off Tex Watson. Or even slept with Tex Watson because there was an underground gay scene going on, So at this time, men couldn't admit they had, they were bisexual or they were gay or whatever. They had to, pretend they weren't. It wasn't socially acceptable at that time, was it? It was just not something they did. Right, oh yes, let's get on to the old Billy Doyle incident. This is from Chaos. And this was referenced earlier in her biography, but they say they just flogged him. But in Chaos, right, and there's actually more about Billy Doyle than this in Chaos. It took a lot of asking around, but eventually I tracked down both Billy Doyle and Charles Tackott. As for the other two, I'd learned Dawson had died of a drug overdose in 1986, and Harrigan was nowhere to be found. Neither had given an interview before, and though they could be cagey, they were also eager to relive their underworld glories. Both were old men now, but they were still operators who acted like they were at the height of their criminal powers. Impressively foul-mouthed, both of them threatened to have me killed at various points in our interviews, although I didn't take either seriously. In our first phone call, Taco filled in with some of the blanks from Doyle's story. He remembered driving up to pick up Doyle, who was passed out somewhere on the Cielo property. His belt had been split, apparently with a knife. A friend who'd come along for the errand said, "I think Wojtek fucked him." They took Doyle, still unconscious, to Mama Cass's place in Hollywood Hills. Tackott remembered thinking, "If we don't take care of him, he's going to go back up there and have a beef." I carried him out, laid him by a tree, and went back to my car and got about 20 feet of welded link chain, which I had there for somebody else. Originally, I put it around his ankle in a tree with a good padlock and snapped it all together, so I knew he's not going anywhere. Cass was in the hospital at the time. She said, "Get the Polaroid, get the Polaroid." Doyle came to a few hours later, still very high and simmering with rage. "I'm going to shoot that motherfucker," Tackott remembered him saying. And I said, no, we're leaving town. We're going to Jamaica. But first you're going to get sober and you're going to be on that fucking tree until you are. I asked Tackott, "Do you think Wojtek did fuck Billy?" "Yeah, that's why Billy was so pissed at him," Tackott said. "Wojtek would have been killed if I hadn't intervened." "Would Billy have hired killers?" I asked, thinking of Manson. "No, he would have taken all the pleasure himself." In his interview with the police, Doyle had allowed that he was furious at Vikowski and his set. "When I was chained to a tree," he said, "they were the object of my rage, which was an unreasonable and unnatural rage." To calm him down, Doyle said, Tackott had chained a sign to the tree that said, "You are loved." Doyle was stuck there for more than a day. After that, Tackott told me, the pair heeled off to Jamaica, where apparently they were making a movie about marijuana. No footage from this film has ever surfaced. Others have said the two were involved in a large narcotics deal. On August 9th, while they were away, Manson goes up and kills those people, and everyone's looking for Doyle, Tackott said. He and Doyle were suspects within days. I picked up the phone one day, and the Toronto Star informed me that me and Billy were in the headlines, two wanted for murder. A couple of days later, back in the United States, I took a lie detector test, Tackott told me. They knew I had nothing to do with it. Billy too. He was in Jamaica with me. We were cleared, out of the country. You can't kill someone long distance. True enough, but you could arrange for someone to do the killing. Tackott adamantly denied that he and Billy Doyle knew Manson. They'd never even met the guy. Nor, he said, had they sold drugs to anyone staying at the Tate house. We were consultants, he said. We'd tell them if it was okay or not. If the drugs were okay. Yeah, he added. Billy was fucking a whole bunch of broads up there. Did you ever hear about any orgies? I asked. If you want to consider Billy fucking the broads an orgy. So there. But that definitely, obviously, describes it as more than just they flogged him, doesn't it? They didn't just flog him. They're supposed to have, Frikowski is supposed to have had sex with him. And that's the thing about Mama Cass wanting a Polaroid. But she asked for a Polaroid of him chained to the tree, which is bizarre since he's supposed to have been her fiancé. So maybe this was after she had kicked him out when he had pissed her off. But yeah. And also, it's all the stuff Tom O'Neill doesn't mention about him as well. It's just really bizarre. Like, Tom O'Neill must have, or did he hear all this? Because Mama Cass's biography was published in the a few years ago now. God, a long time ago. So all this information was out there. But he never mentions this about Billy Doyle. I can't believe that all this other stuff about Billy Doyle was never mentioned. Yes, and also, yes, they're saying, because Tom O'Neill doesn't seem to be interested in text as well, right? Apparently, when people try and ask him questions about text, he's not interested in text, right? Because he's only thinking about Manson. So maybe they never met Manson, but they could have met Tex. Tex was out there wheeling and dealing drugs himself as well. So could they have met Tex? And Linda, because Linda was already a criminal before she showed up at the Manson, at Spahn Ranch. So, they were all out there independently as well, because that's the other myth about it, is that they were all just sat there under Charles Manson's control totally, and they didn't go out and do anything independently. There's evidence that they all had their own independent little things going on. So though Billy Doyle might not have hired Manson, might not have hired them through Manson, he could have got Tex to go up there and do it for him, because he knew that he would be a suspect because of what happened, So he didn't want to do it himself, so he hired someone else. So who knows? I'm not saying that's truth or anything. I'm just putting it forward as a theory. But yeah, that's the one thing about what Tom O'Neill does here. He only asks them about Manson. He doesn't ask them if they knew any of the others. Yeah, it's fucking. Actually, I haven't, because I was actually having to scan the book to get these quotes right. But later on in the book, Billy Doyle denies that they raped him. He says that he says he'd just been beaten. He says he wasn't sore there. He says, I don't think they actually raped me. I think I was just beaten. And he probably would be sore, wouldn't he? Unless Frykowski's got a really small dick, who knows? But yeah, he would feel sore there if he'd been raped, wouldn't he? Surely. But he said that he didn't think he'd been raped. But there's other sources that say, yeah, they raped him. And there was a video of it. So what the hell happened to the video? Might be another reason so many people went up there. It's the other reason, So many other people invaded that crime scene to try and find the tapes of themselves from all sorts. Yeah, they drugged him. But that's the other crazy thing as well that's mentioned in Mama Cass's biography, that Frykowski and Sebring had a penchant for going out and picking up guys and drugging them and filming them. And, this is never mentioned anywhere else. It's just weird, isn't it? How little these things get talked about. And these people are the victims so much is that they're portrayed as people that were completely innocent and just bystanders or whatever, or that they randomly went out and just picked random houses, that it could have been anyone's house that they went to. It could have been your house sort of thing. But no, actually they all, everyone that they murdered, they knew previously. Yeah, it's really, the trip to Jamaica is still in. That's in the police report, because there's part 1 and part 2 of the Cielo Drive police report. But that bizarrely ends. Part 2 just ends suddenly. But it does talk about the police went out. They actually flew police out to Jamaica to see what they were doing. So I think maybe they caught them in some kind of other undercover sting thing. But Billy Doyle, as we'll find out in the next bit, he didn't go to prison because he went on to end up managing Dave Mason. Somehow. He must have met him while at Mama Cass's in order to do this. But he obviously didn't go to prison. So God knows what happens. Yeah, because he didn't want it connected to drugs. He didn't want the crimes connected to drugs, because he was spinning this story that the kids just did it because Charles Manson had brainwashed them. They were trying to distract from the amount of drugs and drug dealing that was going on around them all the time, because it was embarrassing to these rich people. And, they had the money to pay for it. And the films as well. Yeah, I think because there's so many rumors about different films of all sorts going on. Yeah, and Frykowski making films, because Frykowski was a filmmaker as well. That was how he knew Roman Polanski. You know, I think Frykowski's dad funded one of Roman Polanski's first films or something like that. That was why he was so indebted to him and why he let him stay at his house so much. Yeah. Yeah, he was making porn to fund his films. But there was also the drug smuggling, and there was they was trafficking the trunk, the steam. There's those two steamer trunks, and it's thought now that the dangerous drugs they were talking about would have been speed pills. But yeah, but they were smuggling drugs and making this film. Yeah, and that's another thing. Yeah, that's in the Manson file. Jane Fonda. Yeah, and she was another lover of Sebring. So, hello, Delinda. You've missed loads of what I've read out if you've only just arrived. Oh, and this is dragging on longer than I wanted it to. I am going to go to an after stream as well after this. So, but yeah, I've read out loads of Mama Cass's biography. Well, the relevant bits and that. So go back and watch it later, sort of thing. Yeah, exactly. She was in Sebring, and she was married to Roger Vadim. Yeah, Jane Fonda is quite a strange woman. I think she probably also just fell victim to this new thing about to suddenly women to be socially acceptable had to be really up for anything and that. So she was just trying to be as freaky as possible or whatever. I think she probably regrets it all now. Oh right, have you seen it? Oh, that's good. Yeah, at least you heard what I read out. Yeah, you've been busy, too busy to chat. Yeah, well, this is fucking another weird thing, isn't it? Yeah, and there's been a rumor that Sebring made some kind of porno with the girls and was rough with them, too rough with them because he was into sadism and masochism and tying people up and whipping them and that, wasn't he? Obviously. Yeah, well, this is it because that's the first thing anyone said to me. I could find it and read it out, but yeah, I was actually having to physically scan the book. This is my copy of Chaos because the PDF version of Chaos, yeah, and this is a. I'll show you this, yeah, because this is probably a different edition to what you've got. This appears to be the UK edition of Chaos. But yeah, I actually have to physically scan it to get. But later on in Chaos, he says that he didn't think that they had done that to him. But then other men have said, "Oh, well, no man would want to admit that that happened." So he's probably just saying that because he doesn't want to admit. Yeah. Well, in the Manson File, Nicholas's the new edition of the book, and I don't know if it was in the second edition, but he says that Charlie told him that he was there, sort of as they were planning to make the porn with the dogs and Jane Fonda, and he was asked if he wanted to be involved, like if he wanted to be involved with filming it or whatever, and he said no. He said he wasn't interested, but he walked up to the windows to see if it was really true that they were going to do it, and he looked in the windows and he saw it, and he saw that they actually were making it. But who knows? Who bloody knows? I hope it's not true. I hope that someone fucking made that up. But apparently Charlie told Nicholas Shrek that he crept up to the window to see if they was really going to do it, and he saw it actually being done. Jane Fonda with, I think they say it was Great Danes. Oh my god, yeah. I hope that's made up, and I think it probably is. But that's what the rumor is. But I fucking hope, for the sake of my own sanity, that that's made up. Yeah. There's a thing that apparently when Charlie was asked if he wanted to, he said, "No, I'm out. No, no, I don't want to see that." But then he had to go to the he had to go to the window just to see if they was really going to do it, and they apparently was doing it. Oh, well, this is it. Well, the whole Hollywood glamour thing has totally fallen now, hasn't it? They got away with covering all this up back then because the internet didn't exist. They couldn't have done this now, could they? Times in the UK, it's 1:36 a.m. here now. Cool, yeah. I was trying to keep this to an hour, but I've already gone on for 1 hour and 36 minutes. I'll go to an after stream after this. Let's just get out the last slide, which I think is Dave Mason now. Yes, this is the Dave Mason stuff, right? Dave Mason is a musician from Traffic, and he's mentioned earlier on in the first bit of the biography that I read out. He says he remembers Billy Doyle, but it's not, and he says that he thought he was like Darth Vader and a man he would rather never existed or something like that, but it doesn't say why. But this article tells you, and it also shows how he was linked to Mama Cass. He lived with Mama Cass and all this. Right. Back in LA, Mason fell into his old routine of hanging out at Cass Elliott's house, smoking dope and sitting on the lawn in a ring of acoustic guitar players. Her house was a sort of meeting place for all kinds of people, he said. It was nuts up there. It was in August 1970 that Mason and Elliott decided to cut an album together. According to Mason, the whole thing happened organically and spontaneously. I really liked her, he remembered. She was a great lady, very funny, and we just sort of got along together. I just did it because I really liked her, and her career wasn't happening, musically. An odd collaboration, but the duo act debuted at the Hollywood Bowl in September and played a short tour that included an American bandstand appearance and a date at the Fillmore East, where Mason had ended with Traffic 2 years earlier. Dave Mason and Cass Elliott was released on Blue Thumb in February 1971, produced by the singers themselves and promoted with a single, the poppy Something to Make You Happy. As part of the deal with Elliott's label, Dunhill, the single credited to Mason and Cass was issued by that company. Blue Thumb had just secured a distribution deal with Capital EMI that wouldn't last a year. Despite the presence of several good Mason tunes, the album was not received well, and the duo went its separate ways. In early summer, Mason joined Winwood, Capaldi and Wood for a sum total of 6 gigs in English college campuses. The shows were held in the lunchrooms, which is why the resulting album was called Welcome to the Canteen. The original quartet was augmented by Jim Gordon, Rick Greck and Rebop. I've tried to get Traffic together, Mason told Rolling Stones from the road. I've tried to work in units, and it's obvious for some reason they don't work. So I must go and develop me as myself and have it accepted for whatever it's accepted for. I hope it won't be Dave Mason Traffic. It would be nice to drop that. At the time, he said the snail's pace was just too much for a restless sort like him. Just like Derek and the Dominoes the previous summer, he couldn't get Winwood and the others to work harder or do more shows. He got angry and returned to the States again. It was just 1 gig a week, which is stupid because you get on stage and it would take half an hour just to warm up to it, he complained. There's the subheading, Are you feeling all right? The Mason and Cass project had failed to yield a hit single. Indeed, the album was roundly booed by critics and fans alike, and shortly after its release started turning up in cut-out bins across America, where it was a depressingly common sight until the start of the CD age in the mid-80s. Upon his return from England and the disappointing episode with Traffic and Welcome to the Canteen, Mason went through 2 managers, Don Sherman and Billy Doyle. And because I was young and drugged out and not thinking straight, I wound up in court with the latter. Eventually, Mason lost all the rest of his publishing to Doyle and was ordered by a judge to pay his former manager a settlement of $350,000. Mason could only stare at the judge in disbelief. So it's like, what the fuck, right? So Billy Doyle, right, was engaged to Mama Cass, gets raped by Wojtek Frykowski, fucks off and makes a film about hashish in Jamaica, somehow ends up managing Dave Mason from Traffic, stealing all his publishing, and Dave Mason ends up having to pay Billy Doyle $350,000. Right, Capone, right? What's that in today's money? What, right? So this is like 1970. I know. This is crazy, right? This is the thing about Billy Doyle. What year was it? Because it doesn't give you many years in this article. I haven't, because the article, the link I have already shared it in my group, and I make sure all these articles are linked but this is just a very small extract from the article. But it says in 1970 is when he does all this with Cass Elliott. Right, but by 1970, surely Billy Doyle wasn't hanging around with Mama Cass anyway. And how the hell did Billy Doyle end up managing anyone in the music industry? How did he end up? What the fuck? You know, it's just like, what? But he got $350,000 out of Dave Mason, apparently. It's crazy. So it's like, what the fuck? And also, Dave Mason is going to write a book, Sam said. His book is meant to be coming out soon. And he'll write about this. What, is it in Chaos? Is it in Chaos? Because I don't remember reading about this in Chaos. The Billy Doyle managed Dave Mason from Traffic. Because fucking, this is news to me. And it's like, and he got $350,000 out of him. Dave Mason. No, Dave Mason's English, I think. Yeah, no, he's from England. Billy Doyle is Canadian, though, if that's who you're talking about. But no, Dave Mason's English, I know that, yeah. He did Hole in My Shoe, the song Hole in My Shoe. He's the guy who wrote that. Right. That's the end of the stream. Well, that's the end of everything I want to read out. And I'll go to an after stream later. Yeah, well, that's it, isn't it? Yeah, fucking and Dave Mason says he was drugged out and not paying attention, and apparently Billy Doyle had put it about he was a stockbroker and that. So maybe he was just really convincing, and he managed to convince Dave Mason that he could manage him. But somehow Doyle conned him out of all his publishing, and then he ended up having to pay him $350,000. So about Doyle, you're talking about, yeah. Doyle's the one who's Canadian, yeah. Doyle's Canadian. Yeah, it's Tackott is the guy that chained Billy Doyle to the tree and who flew to Jamaica with him to get him out of the country so he wouldn't kill Frykowski and Folger. Do you know what I mean? But none of this is brought up in the official narrative, is it? That there was people that had threatened to kill Folger and Frykowski, both victims of Cielo Drive, a couple of weeks before it happened. And none of that's brought up in court. You know, this is all covered up. It's just very, very weird, isn't it? When Tom O'Neill's saying, oh, could he have hired anyone? I say, oh, I don't know. We never met Manson. But yeah, what? Did they meet Tex? Who knows? Who fucking knows? Oh, yes. Good quote. Holier than thou for the public and unholier than the devil in reality. Yeah, well, it must be, because what record company was it under? There's not a lot of detail given. Apparently, Dave Mason's about to write a book. Or he's written a book and it's meant to be coming out. Sam pointed this out. It's meant to be coming out next year, but it got delayed. It'll be interesting to see if he goes into more detail about how he ended up having to pay him $350,000. And was this before or after 1969? When did this happen? But yeah, just all the crazy stuff about Billy Doyle, basically. This is why I had to do a stream. I just couldn't believe all this stuff that was not seemingly mentioned anywhere else. If it is in Chaos and I missed it, or because I originally read Chaos as a PDF, I've got the book here. But I was pretty sure it only said about the incident, the incident in the garden. Yeah, well, just the amount of drugs that he had put away, right? He had totally damaged his brain. People don't seem to understand. The drugs can damage your brain, and the amount of drugs that he had done, he had actually absolutely destroyed himself with drugs. And if he was a sociopath anyway, so had a penchant for being violent and could repress his feelings of guilt, so repress his empathy, and didn't care if he hurt people, and could go out and do stuff, and they can end up getting a thrill out of committing acts of violence and getting away with it. That's another creepy thing that can happen with sociopaths. So he could have been doing all this sort of thing, and then on top of that, taking all that speed, it's going to have just messed up with his reasoning even worse. So he's going to have had even less of a conscience. So it's like, because not everyone who takes speed is going to turn into a murderous psycho. But if you're not that empathetic anyway, And if you're prone to violence, and then you do a ton of speed, then yeah, you are gonna blow at any time. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, cumulative effect of drugs. And in his psychiatry report, they blamed the Datura belladonna trip. It was actually Jimson weed, the plant he ate, which is what they're now calling Datura, but they blamed that for damaging his brain more. But now they would say it was the cumulative effect of all the drugs. Where did we start talking about Jim Morrison? I like Jim Morrison. You said it. Oh, the Doors is one of my, yeah, I love the Doors as well. And Jim Morrison, yeah, and I've heard a lot about his death and his dad and all that. Obviously, Dave McGowan uncovering that he was what said about the Doors. Yeah, I love the Doors. I love Jim Morrison as a singer. He was a really interesting singer, and his lyrics are very, very interesting, aren't they? Yeah, he was apparently a bit of an asshole, wasn't he, as well? Yeah, he wasn't a nice guy. It was difficult to work with because he was very drugged and drunk a lot of the time and egotistical and all that. And I don't believe like what Dave McGowan implies that he or implied that he was some kind of agent just because his dad was in the military. I think that he was obviously rebelling against the military. I don't think he was an agent at all. I think that's bullshit. Oh yeah, there's a few fucking people claim that Morrison and Manson met each other, yeah. And Manson really did hang out and play cards with a lot of people in that. He probably did meet Manson. And he's supposed to have based his bloody image on Manson after he met him and that, when he grew a beard and grew his hair to the same length as Manson and all that, yeah, no. Oh yes, an American Prayer. If you haven't heard that, if you like the Doors, no one's heard it. You haven't heard it. It was because apparently that was just he just sat in the studio and read out his poems, and it got put to music later. They put it to music later. Yeah, that is good. And he was very photogenic. Lots of good photos of him. There's that woman. I forget the woman's name, but the famous photographer that photographed him a lot. Did these famous crucifix one where he stands in the doorway like that, and yeah, the crucifix one. Yeah, sure. I've got a biography of him called "No One Here Gets Out Alive." That was quite good as well. I haven't read that for years, so I'll have to read it again. Yeah, I thought the music worked really well. It was really thoughtfully done, wasn't it? It was obviously done lovingly. It wasn't just done to make money, was it? It was done, yeah, to bring it. Yeah. Gloria Stavers, is that her name? Yeah, yeah, she's famous photographer. She probably photographed a lot of people, didn't she? But I know she took a lot of the pictures of Jim Morrison, and they just worked together really well. Posed with her, posed for her really well, didn't he? I actually met Patti Smith. I've got her autograph. Yeah, I get it. She played, yeah, a crazy place actually on the Isle of Wight. House, the poet Tennyson, famous poet. He had a house on the Isle of Wight. He had it built. Sorry, when I go that way, I headbutt the mic. I hope that doesn't make a huge noise. He had a house on the Isle of Wight built, and it's now a hotel. It's been turned into a hotel. It's a mansion, but there's a room in it that had a stage because he was that rich. He had a fucking mansion house built with a stage, and Patti Smith played there, and I met her, and I got her to sign her ticket. Yeah, and this is what she wrote as her signature. See the red one here. If you can see it, you can see Patty. Because the pen won't work. The scribble up there. That's just because the pen won't work. But yeah, that's her autograph. She's tiny. Couldn't believe how short she was. Because I'm not that tall. But yeah, she's must be like maybe even less than 5 foot. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how well researched it was really. I've generally read a lot about him because I always admired him as a vocalist. Because like I'm an alto, so I can sing men's vocal parts really easily, and I've always loved his voice. I've always thought he was a really good singer, but difficult for a woman to sing his songs because it's so sexual. Practically every song he sings is so sexual, isn't it? And it's hard for a woman to sing that authentically without being a lesbian. Do you know what I mean? It's just hard to sing it for a woman that's not a lesbian to sing it authentically. But then also in this day and age, why can't people just suspend their disbelief? Because when I sing a song that's male lyrics, you know, a man that was sung by a man originally, I just sing it as if I am a man. Do you know what I mean? Can't people just suspend their disbelief? So why shouldn't I sing Jim Morrison talking about having sex with women? So the fan of my computer's going. Gotta shake my computer around. Come on, stop it. For God's sake. That's slightly better. Right. Sorry about that. Just have to beat my computer up sometimes. Because the fans are problematic. Right, in fact, I've now read out everything I wanted to read out. So I'll probably end this stream now and go to an after stream. Right? So if you're watching I'll make sure it goes to my Facebook group and YouTube. And yeah, so it can get a bit more crazy in the after stream anyway. But yes, that was everything that I wanted to read out anyway. And it's just quite shocking that all this was missed about Billy Doyle, basically, isn't it? And that, you know, this isn't spoken about more. I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it was the same guy when someone pointed it out to me, but it was. And why aren't there any pictures of him? That is weird as hell. It's just really weird that there isn't any photos of him. And yeah, what the hell, you know, basically. Anyway, yeah, and we'll carry on talking about Jim Morrison more. So we're just going to go off on a tangent now. But yeah. Okay, so I'll end this stream now, but keep watching the channel because within a couple of minutes I'll go live again. Basically, well, probably about a minute, as long as it takes me to set up the stream and StreamYard, basically. So, okay, I'll end this stream now. Thank you for coming, if you're not going to come to the after stream. But yeah, if you're coming to the after stream, I'll see you in a minute. Thank you, and good night.